Longtime BBC star Steve Wright has tragically died aged 69, it was announced today. The presenter joined the BBC in the 1970s and went on to host afternoon shows on both Radio 1 and 2. He fronted shows for the broadcaster for more than 4 decades, including Top of the Pops on BBC TV. His family said, "It is with deep sorrow and profound regret that we announce the passing of our beloved Steve Wright." In addition to his son, Tom, and daughter, Lucy, Steve leaves behind his brother, Lawrence, and his father Richard. Also, much-loved close friends and colleagues, and millions of devoted radio listeners who had the good fortune and great pleasure of allowing Steve into their daily lives as one of the UK's most enduring and popular radio personalities. As we all grieve, the family requests privacy at this immensely difficult time. No further details, such as the cause of the DJ's death, have been released. Radio 2 host Sarah Cox struggled to hold back tears during her program on Tuesday as she discussed the news. She told listeners, "It's really hard to know what to say about the news of Steve Wright's passing except we are all absolutely devastated and shocked and blindsided by this news. Steve was an extraordinary broadcaster, a really kind person. He was witty, he was warm, and he was a huge part of the Radio 2 family, and I know my fellow DJs will all be absolutely shattered too. And I imagine you're feeling sad too. We've all lost a lovely friend who's been a big part of our lives for so many lives, so we're going to do Steve proud for the rest of the show, and we're going to play the music that he loved so much," she added. Former Radio 2 colleague Ken Bruce said, "Totally shocked to hear the news about the great Steve Wright. We were planning lunch to celebrate the award of his richly deserved MBE. An outstanding and innovative broadcaster whose listeners loved him. What a loss to the world of radio." Fellow Radio 2 stalwart Tony Blackburn added, "I am so sad that my dear friend Steve Wright has passed away. He was a great broadcaster and we just loved one another's company. I was shocked at the news and will miss him terribly." Joe Wiley has thanked Steve Wright, the broadcaster's broadcaster, for all his support over the years. In a post to Twitter, the radio DJ and television presenter wrote, "What a man. What a legend. The broadcaster's broadcaster. One of the kindest, loveliest people I've had the pleasure to work with. Thanks for the support and music chat over the years. Can't believe we won't meet in the bowels of MV for our weekly catch-up. Love you, Wrighty." Zoe Ball has told Steve Wright to rest well, you wonderful magic man, following his death at the age of 69. She wrote on Twitter, "Wrighty. Our radio friend, our inspiration, master of broadcasting, the godfather, always there for us all with support, advice, love and most importantly laughter. Rest well, you wonderful magic man. Life won't be the same without you here. Love you, my friend, my hero." Steve had a host of celebrity fans including Eamon Holmes, who said, "In a world of mediocrity, Steve Wright had talent. He had the voice and the vision, and my Sunday mornings will be a lot poorer without him. R.I.P. Steve." Richard Hammond tweeted, "I've lost my hero. Steve Wright has left us. Heartfelt condolences to his family and friends. He was the reason I started my career. Steve, you changed radio and thus broadcasting for us and shall be very, very sadly missed. Go well." Dame Esther Ranson, who was interviewed by Steve Wright on many occasions, said he was a unique broadcaster. He created a kind of club which, whether he was interviewing you or whether you were enjoying it as a listener, you looked forward to joining every day, she told the PA news agency. It is a very rare quality, and he made it sound easy. It was frequently very funny, and when he left his daily afternoon show he really knocked a hole in the day for many of us who relied on his company. He will be a real loss. Matt Lucas referred to Steve Wright as the most brilliant radio broadcaster of them all. In a post to Twitter, the comedian wrote, "Steve Wright was the most brilliant radio broadcaster of them all. So gifted and natural and engaging. It was always a pleasure and an honor to appear on his show. What a huge loss." The broadcaster joined BBC Radio 1 in 1980 to host a Saturday evening show before moving on to host Steve Wright in the afternoon a year later until 1993. Wright then fronted the Radio 1 breakfast show for a year until 1995, and completed a stint at commercial radio stations before returning to BBC Radio 2 in 1996 to host Steve Wright's Saturday show and Sunday Love Songs. In 1999, he recreated Steve Wright in the afternoon every weekday on Radio 2, with celebrity interviews and entertaining trivia featured in his Factoid segment, before stepping down in September 2022. Former BBC Radio 1 host Scott Mills took over the afternoon slot as part of the station's schedule shake-up. Wright continued to present Sunday Love Songs on BBC Radio 2, and since October last year, he presented the long-running show Pick of the Pops, which had previously been fronted by Paul Gambaccini. Wright appeared on air on Sunday, hosting a pre-recorded special Valentine's Day edition of his A Love Songs program. Wright was honored for his services to radio in the December 2023 New Year Honors list and said he wanted to dedicate it to all the people in broadcasting who gave comfort and public service during the pandemic. Tim Davie, BBC Director General, said, "All of us at the BBC are heartbroken to hear this terribly sad news. Steve was a truly wonderful broadcaster who has been a huge part of so many of our lives over many decades. He was the ultimate professional, passionate about the craft of radio and deeply in touch with his listeners." This was deservedly recognized in the New Year Honors list with his MBE for services to radio. No one had more energy to deliver shows that put a smile on audiences' faces. They loved him deeply. We are thinking of Steve and his family and will miss him terribly. Head of Radio 2's Helen Thomas added, "Steve understood the connection and companionship that radio engenders better than anyone, and we all loved him for it. He was a consummate professional whose attention to detail was always second to none, and he made his guests laugh. He was fair, and he wanted to showcase them and their work in the best possible light, bringing brilliant stories to our listeners." Steve's afternoon show was an institution that began on Radio 1 and later moved over to Radio 2, where it was broadcast for 23 years. He believed in the BBC passionately during his career that spanned for more than 4 decades, and he was always up for pursuing new ideas. He brought joy to millions of listeners with his Sunday Love Songs as well as the legendary Pick of the Pops, which he took on last year and was having fun experimenting with, alongside a host of specials and new BBC Sounds formats which he loved doing. "Steve was the first presenter I ever produced more than 20 years ago, and I remember the pure amazement I felt, sitting opposite this legendary broadcaster whose shows I had listened to and marveled at whilst growing up in Hull. For all of us at Radio 2, he was a wonderful colleague and a friend with his excellent sense of humor, generosity with his time, and endless wise words. We were lucky to have him with us for all these decades, and we will miss his talent and his friendship terribly. Follow Mirror Celebs on TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube and Threads.